She thought the screaming would save her. Instead, it brought him. The dark in that room had a smell: old flour, wet cardboard, metal gone cold with night. Alina Bellini was 24, a waitress in Chicago, and she had never been the kind of woman who asked dangerous men for anything. She came to work with a simple plan: survive the dinner rush, count her tips, and get home before her landlord noticed the rent was late again. Then the lock turned. Then the lights went out. Then somebody left her there. When the footsteps finally came, she was half hoarse, half delirious, and still furious enough to hit the door one more time. She expected a manager, a cop. Maybe nobody at all. Instead, the man outside said nothing. She only heard the soft metallic click of a lighter, then a voice like a blade drawn slow from velvet. "Step back from the door, little sparrow." That was the moment everything broke, because by sunrise she would be under a mafia boss's protection. And by the end of the week, men would start dying for knowing her name. By 2 in the morning, my fists had gone numb. That was the strange part, not the fear, not the dark. Not even the way my throat felt flayed raw from screaming. It was the numbness. The body gave up in sections, apparently, first the fingertips, then the wrists. Then the part of me that still thought somebody decent would come if I made enough noise. The storage room behind the kitchen at La Notte had never seemed big before. During service, it was all boxes of imported tomatoes, sacks of flour, cheap paper napkins, and too much oregano in the air. Overnight, with the lights dead and the lock turned from the outside, it became a country, a cold one. I sat on the concrete for maybe 30 seconds at a time before panic forced me back to my feet. I kicked the door. I hit it with a mop handle until that snapped. I called Bruno every name I knew and a few I invented. When my voice tore, I kept going anyway. Once around midnight, I heard something from the other side of the vent. Small, a cough, then a thin, frightened knocking. "Hey," I rasped into the dark. "Hey, who's there?" No answer. Just another cough. I found the shelf by feel, climbed it badly, and pressed my ear to the vent. "If you can hear me, keep knocking." 3 weak taps answered back. A child could have made that sound. Or a teenager. One of the dishwashers, maybe. Leo, with the inhaler he always forgot until he needed it. My stomach turned into ice. "Okay," I whispered, because screaming clearly wasn't helping anyone. "Okay, keep breathing." I spent the next hour listening between my own panic and his, counting the spaces between coughs, talking nonsense into the metal, telling him stupid things about the tiramisu recipe, about how Bruno oversalted the family meal, about how if he died before I did, I'd never forgive him for the inconvenience. That made him laugh once, a terrible little sound, but alive. Sometime after 3, the restaurant changed. You notice things when you serve tables for a living: shoes, voices, silences. The way a group sits when they're there for dinner, and the way they sit when they're there to own the room. La Notte had one language during dinner service and another after midnight. I'd learned to keep my head down around the second kind. This silence was different again. It moved, footsteps, more than one man, fast then stopping all at once. A voice outside, male, low. Not Bruno. I shoved away from the shelves and stumbled to the door. "Please," then I heard it. A soft metallic click, not loud, not dramatic. Just a small, precise sound, so calm it cut through everything else. A lighter opening, closing, opening again. The hallway went still enough that I could hear my own breathing scrape. A second later, a man's voice came through the door. "Step back." No shout, no panic, no question, just that. "I'm not alone," I said, because somehow that mattered more than anything. "There's someone in the vent passage. He's been coughing for hours. He needs—" The silence on the other side tightened. "Step back from the door," he said again, and there was something in his voice I couldn't name yet. "Now, Sparrow." I don't know why I obeyed him. Maybe because nobody who used that tone had ever had to repeat themselves in his life. I pressed my back to the shelves. My knees shook so hard I had to lock them. Then the hallway exploded. Not with a gunshot, with force. Metal screamed. Hinges snapped low, exactly where the rust had been weakest. The door crashed inward so violently, a gust of colder air hit my face and almost dropped me. The first thing I saw was light. The second was a man in a dark overcoat, one hand still around a silver lighter. He was taller than the doorway seemed to allow. Dark hair, no wasted motion, face cut from something harder than flesh. There were 3 men behind him, armed and watchful, but the room bent around the one in front. He looked at me once, not up and down. Not like men sometimes did when I spilled wine or leaned too close to set plates down. Just once, straight through, taking inventory. Split lip, flour on my black skirt, bloody knuckles. Still standing, his gaze moved to the broken vent. "Leo," I said, swallowing blood and air at the same time. If it's Leo, he keeps his inhaler in the right pocket of his apron. One of the men behind him was already moving. The man in the coat didn't take his eyes off me. How long? I don't know. Since close, maybe before, my voice cracked and I hated that it did. Bruno said inventory, then the lights. "Don't say his name like he matters," one of the men behind him muttered. The man in the coat silenced him without turning around. It was terrifying. That kind of power, effortless enough to be quiet. I realized with a drop in my stomach that I knew who he had to be. Not from having met him, from atmosphere. From the way the whole city sometimes seemed to hold its breath around certain names. Dante Salvator, owner of La Knot. Owner of half the restaurants on this side of the river. Owner, if rumors were true, of far worse things than that. My body chose that moment to remember fear properly. My knees buckled. I caught the edge of the shelf. He crossed the room in 2 steps and caught my elbow before I hit the floor. His hand was warm, steady, bare. I hated how much that mattered. "I'm fine," I said automatically. His eyes flicked to my knuckles, then back to my face. "No." That should have sounded arrogant. It didn't. It sounded like fact. Behind him, somebody cursed. Another voice called out, "Got him," barely conscious. Relief hit so hard it almost hurt. I shut my eyes for a second. When I opened them, Dante Salvator was still looking at me, too closely. "What?" I asked, because nerves made me stupid. His thumb shifted once against the inside of my elbow. Not a caress, a correction, as if checking whether I'd fall again. "You stopped screaming the moment I answered you," he said. I stared at him. "Most people beg first," he went on. "You asked for someone else." I heard him coughing. "That isn't an answer." I almost said, "It is if you're not heartless." Luckily for my continued existence, I swallowed that. The men behind him carried Leo out, wrapped in a tablecloth. Dante released my arm only when he was sure I could stand alone. Then he stepped back and the temperature of the room changed with the loss of him. A man in a navy suit appeared in the doorway, older, severe. "The police?" Dante didn't look away from me. No, that one word should not have frightened me more than the locked room. It did. "Miss Bellini," the older man said, voice gentler than his face, "you'll come with us." I looked from him to Dante. "I have an apartment." "You had one," Dante said. I went cold. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, the silver lighter clicking shut in his hand, "you don't sleep alone tonight." There were 1,000 reasons to refuse. I heard none of them. Because behind me was the storage room. In front of me was a man every dangerous rumor in Chicago seemed to orbit. And somewhere between those 2 facts, my old life had already closed. I followed him out. I had never been inside a house that quiet, not a rich house. I'd served in those. Places with marble counters nobody used and art hung at eye level like a challenge. Dante Salvator's house wasn't loud enough to show off. That was worse. It sat on the lakefront behind iron gates and stone walls. All dark windows and old money pretending it had never heard of guilt. Even the foyer felt expensive in a way that made me want to apologize to it. My shoes clicked once on the black and white marble before the sound disappeared into the size of the place. The older man from the restaurant, Vittorio, I would learn, handed his coat to someone I didn't see. "Rosa will bring tea," he said. "I'd rather go home." "You can add that to the list," he said mildly. "The list of what?" "The things you'd rather do." I should have been offended. I was too tired. Dante had walked ahead without checking whether I followed, which somehow forced me to keep up more effectively than if he'd ordered it. At the end of the hall, a woman in her 50s with silver-threaded dark hair appeared from a side door, wiping her hands on an apron. She took one look at me, the torn blouse, the flour, the blood, the hour, and her whole face softened. "Oh, Cara," she said. I almost cried on sight. She seemed to know it. "Tea first. Questions after." "That's Rosa," said a cheerful male voice behind me. "If she offers you soup, say yes. If she offers me soup, tell her I'm fasting." I turned. The man leaning in the archway was broad-shouldered, around 30, with a tie loosened under a leather jacket and the expression of someone who'd been born amused and kept going out of spite. He held a paper bag from a 24-hour pharmacy in one hand and looked at me with open curiosity, which was almost a relief after everyone else's control. Rosa sniffed. "You've been fasting since Tuesday, Nino, yet my pistachio cookies keep disappearing." Nino placed a hand over his heart. "Slander in the house of God." "This isn't a church," Vittorio said. "That has never stopped Italians." Despite myself, I let out a sound that was nearly a laugh. Nino brightened like he'd won something. "There, excellent," she laughs. "The boss hates when people look like funerals before breakfast." "The boss," I repeated, because repeating absurd things is sometimes all you can do. He grinned. "Yes. The one who tore a steel door off its hinges for you. Hard to miss." My face heated. "I didn't ask him to." "No," Nino said, glancing toward the hallway Dante had vanished down. "That's usually how it starts." Vittorio gave him a look sharp enough to slice fruit. Nino made a zipping motion over his lips and immediately ruined it by saying, "I'm only saying, if someone broke into a pantry for me, I'd at least send flowers." Rosa smacked the back of his arm with a dish towel as she passed. He winced theatrically. I should not have felt safer because these people bickered. I did. Rosa led me upstairs to a room bigger than my entire apartment. Cream walls, a carved bed, a window facing black water beyond the city lights. She set tea on the nightstand and a folded pair of soft clothes beside it. "Bathroom there," she said. "Hot water works. Ignore the size of it. Men build houses like they're arguing with their fathers." I smiled before I meant to. Her gaze dropped to my hands. "Sit. I'm okay. You are young, that is not the same thing." She cleaned my knuckles with practiced hands, not doctor practiced, mother practiced. Somewhere downstairs, a door opened and closed. Low male voices traveled up through the vent, blurred by distance. Italian, mostly. I knew enough from restaurant kitchens to catch tone if not content. "Not good tone. Why am I here?" I asked quietly. Rosa wrapped the last knuckle and tied it off. "Because someone wanted you frightened, maybe dead, because he heard you. Because now you are part of the problem." That didn't help. She patted my wrist once and left me to wash flour and terror off my skin. In the shower, I found bruises already forming along my shoulder where I'd hit the shelves. The hot water turned pink around my hands. When I closed my eyes, I saw the door again. Then the light. Then his face. Not handsome, exactly. Not in the clean way magazines liked. Too severe for that. Dante looked like a man built by decisions nobody else wanted to make. When I came out, dressed in a borrowed sweater and soft pants, he was standing at the window. I stopped dead. He turned at the sound as if he'd been listening for that exact movement. He'd taken off his coat, white shirt, dark vest, no tie. The silver lighter rested in his palm, closed now. "How long have you been in here?" "Long enough to know you considered climbing out the bathroom window." I looked at the window, then back at him. Was I wrong? No. That pulled an embarrassed laugh out of me. I hated that too. He glanced at my hands. Sit. It was apparently everyone's favorite command. I sat on the edge of the bed. He crossed the room, crouched in front of me, and set a small first aid kit on the quilt. My body went tight. He noticed. Of course he noticed. If you want Rosa, I'll call her, he said. That should have made it easy to say yes. Instead, I shook my head. He unwrapped one hand, slower this time than Rosa had been, careful, efficient. His fingers were rougher than I expected. A burn scar crossed the base of his thumb, pale against olive skin. I stared at it too long. Does it hurt? He asked. My hand or your patience? One corner of his mouth moved, not a smile. The memory of one, both. I looked down as he spread ointment over my skin. Can I go to work tomorrow? No. My landlord handled. I don't know what that means when you say it. It means you won't be evicted. I jerked my head up. You can't just, I can, he said. The better question is why you think I shouldn't. Because powerful men did not do favors without taking the cost later. Because my father had taught me that before the freezer took him. Because everything in me recoiled at owing a man like him even breath. I said none of that. He tied the bandage, precise and clean. Your phone stays downstairs for now, he said. You don't leave this property without one of my men. You tell Rosa or Bianca if you need anything. Bianca, our doctor. That feels excessive. His gaze lifted to mine, flat, direct. A girl was locked in one of my buildings overnight. I'm not a girl. No, he said quietly, you're not. The room changed shape around that sentence. I swallowed. And if I say no, he stood. So did the air. Then you say it from here, he said, because until I know who touched you and why, this house is the only answer you get. He started for the door. Mr. Salvator, he paused. Thank you, I said, the words scraping on pride the whole way out. He didn't turn around. His hand tightened once around the silver lighter. Then very softly, sleep, sparrow. The door shut behind him with a quiet finality no lock needed to improve. By afternoon, I understood two things. First, nobody in Dante Salvator's house wasted movement. Second, everyone knew where he was even when he said nothing. It lived in the walls, a change in footsteps, a straightening of shoulders. The way conversations narrowed to the exact amount of air he allowed them. I noticed because noticing had become my oldest habit. In restaurants, you survived by reading tables. In his house, it was the same skill with higher stakes. Rosa fed me eggs, toast, and an espresso so good it made me briefly forgive the existence of organized crime. Nino drifted through the kitchen with a folder under one arm and a boiled chicken breast in a plastic container. That, Rosa said, glaring at the container, is not food. It is discipline. It is sadness. He pointed at me. See, this is why I can never be my best self. Hostile environment. I wrapped both hands around the espresso cup, inhaling, dark roast, orange peel, a trace of cardamom. You ground this too fine. Rosa blinked. What? The espresso. I took another sip. It's bitter at the back, still good, but the cardamom's covering a weak bean. Nino looked offended on Rosa's behalf. Rosa looked impressed. Try this, she said, setting a spoonful of custard in front of me from a steel bowl. No guessing, tell me. I did. Lemon zest, mascarpone, too much sugar in the first minute, then balanced by salt. She stared as if I'd stolen state secrets. My mother baked, I said, suddenly awkward under the attention. When we couldn't afford waste, she taught me to taste before we spent. I can usually tell. Usually, Nino repeated. Madonna, you're a kitchen witch. Rosa crossed herself for effect. Maybe finally a useful person in this house. Cruel, Nino said. And on a day when I am basically starving. You ate prosciutto in the car. That was medicinal. I smiled into my cup, then stopped when I realized Dante was standing in the doorway. No one had announced him. Nobody needed to. He wore a charcoal suit today, no overcoat, no tie. Sun from the courtyard caught the cut of his cheekbone and went colder for the effort. His gaze moved from Rosa to the custard to me. "You're making friends," he said. It was not a question. I had not yet learned whether he asked those by choice. "Apparently I'm a kitchen witch," I said. Nino lifted a hand. My phrase, credit where due. Dante ignored him. "Vittorio in 10 minutes. Rosa made a shooing motion at me with her spoon. "Go. Before the men start speaking in numbers and make me want to poison them." Nino clutched his chest. "She says this, Alina, but if she poisons anybody it'll be me, and my mother will weep over a very handsome corpse." Dante's eyes flicked to him. "If you're done performing." "I never am," Nino said sadly, then to me in an undertone, "See, repression." Dante led me through 2 halls and into an office paneled in dark wood. The room smelled faintly of leather, old paper, and whatever cologne he wore under the colder scent of outside air. Not sweet, not sharp, something restrained. Vittorio stood by the desk with a file open. "Miss Bellini," he said, "how are your hands?" "Attached, promising." Dante took the chair behind the desk. I remained standing until he looked up once briefly and pointed to the seat opposite him. Command by eyebrow, very efficient. Vittorio opened the file. "Bruno Esposito has been missing since last night." "Missing," I repeated. Dante's gaze stayed on me. "Does that surprise you? A little less every hour." "Good, let him know I wasn't stupid." "Let me know it too." Vittorio slid a photograph across the desk. "Bruno outside the restaurant 3 nights ago, talking to a man I didn't recognize. Thick shoulders, expensive coat, face half turned." "Have you seen him?" Vittorio asked. I took the photo. My stomach tightened. "No, but I heard a voice in the dry storage hall yesterday, before Bruno locked me in." Dante leaned back. "Tell me." So I did. Every word I remembered, the cadence. 1 man impatient, 1 nervous. Numbers, Saturday delivery. A phrase about the river route being safer now that Massimo had signed off. When I repeated that, something minute changed in the room, just a fraction. "Enough." "Who's Massimo?" I asked. "No one you need to worry about yet," Vittorio said. That answer always means the opposite. Dante's lighter clicked once in his hand. "It means keep going." So I did. The impatient voice had said, if the girl heard anything, put her somewhere cold until morning. I didn't add how that sentence had replayed in my head all night. I didn't need to. Dante's expression had gone still in a way that made stillness look violent. When I finished, silence sat between us. Finally Dante said, "You remember voices well." "Yes, how?" My father stammered after his stroke. I kept my eyes on the photograph, not on him. People got impatient, interrupted him. Guessed wrong, so I learned to wait and hear the whole thing. Vittorio's face altered slightly. "Respect, maybe." Dante said nothing for a moment. "Then you'll sit in on tonight's staff list review." I looked up. "Why?" "Because if you hear that voice again," he said, "I want a name attached to it." That was insane. That was also the first thing he'd said all day that made me feel useful instead of handled. "Okay," I said. His eyes held mine a beat too long. One of those dangerous almost moments I would only learn to name later. Heat without touch. A line neither of us crossed. Vittorio cleared his throat and ruined it for everybody. That evening, I sat in the back of a private dining room while managers came and went under the excuse of payroll verification. The room smelled of polished walnut and red wine. Armed men pretended not to be armed in every corner. Dante stood by the window, 1 hand in his pocket, saying little. He didn't need more. By the 7th voice, I was exhausted. By the 9th, I heard it, not the whole voice. Just 1 sentence to the waiter carrying coffee. "Too much sugar ruins the profile." My head snapped up. Massimo Salvatore smiled across the table at Dante. He looked like family. Same dark hair, same precise stillness, softened into charm. He was handsome in a way Dante refused to be, warm at the edges, easy to trust, carefully human. And every nerve in my body woke up at once. Dante saw it. He saw everything. "Miss Bellini," Massimo said smoothly, "you look pale." I opened my mouth, closed it, the room listened. Before I could speak, Dante moved, just one step between us. "Enough for tonight," he said. Massimo's smile did not change. That somehow made it worse. As Dante escorted me from the room, his hand hovered at the small of my back without touching. Another almost, another line. In the hallway, I whispered, "It was him." The silver lighter clicked shut. "I know," Dante said, and I realized too late that the war had been standing at his table the entire time. Massimo did not come to breakfast the next day. I knew because the house breathed easier without him in it, though nobody would have said so out loud. Even Nino complained with more enthusiasm. "I'm not saying I distrust men who wear cashmere indoors," he told Rosa while attempting to steal toast from the counter, "but I am saying it's suspicious." Rosa slapped his hand away. "Everything is suspicious to you. I work for Dante Salvator. Paranoia is cardiovascular exercise." I should have laughed more. Instead, I kept hearing that voice in the private room. Smooth. Educated, careful. The same voice that had discussed putting me somewhere cold. Vittorio arrived before noon with information, and the kind of face older men get when they're about to tell you life is uglier than you hoped. "Bruno won't be found," he said. I stared at him. "Because he ran." "No," Dante said from the doorway, "that was all." It should not have answered me. It did. A chill moved over my skin. "You killed him." Dante's gaze held mine. He didn't lie. "Yes." Rosa muttered a prayer at the stove. Nino studied the fruit bowl as if oranges had become morally complex. "He locked me in." "He did," Dante said. "That doesn't mean—" I stopped. Because in his world, apparently, it did mean. It meant exactly that. Something must have shown on my face because his expression altered by half a degree. Harder on himself, not softer for me. "That room was a message," he said. He delivered it. He understood the cost. I hated that part of me understood the logic even as the rest recoiled from it. "Why tell me?" "Because if you stay here," he said, "you don't get half-truths." That was, perversely, the fairest thing anyone had said to me since this began. The day turned brittle after that. Rain hit the lake hard enough to gray the windows. Bianca Sera arrived in the afternoon, slim, dark-haired, efficient, with a medical bag and the serene expression of a woman unafraid of armed men or their opinions. She examined my shoulder, declared I'd live, and gave Dante a look that suggested he was the most difficult patient in Illinois. "You're sleeping?" she asked me. "Badly?" "That makes two of you," she said, not even pretending not to mean him. Dante ignored her. Bianca ignored his ignoring. Later, thunder rolled over the house and the lights dipped once. My body reacted before my mind did. I froze in the upstairs hallway, tea tray in hand, pulse trying to climb out of my throat. A storage room with the lights off is still a storage room after you leave it. I must have made some sound, because Dante appeared at the far end of the hall almost immediately. He crossed to me, saw the tray shaking in my hands, and took it before the porcelain could hit the floor. "Easy," he said. I hated that word from anyone else, not from him. "I'm fine." "No," he said, and there it was again, that blunt fact I kept resenting because it made room for nothing false. Thunder cracked a second time, too close. I flinched. His eyes dropped to the white of my knuckles. "Look at me." I did. "Tell me 5 things you can see." I blinked. "What 5 things?" The hallway lamp, the runner rug, his collar. The rain on the window, the silver lighter clipped in his vest pocket. His gaze sharpened on that last one, though I couldn't imagine why. 4 things you can touch," he said. I looked down at my own hands. My sweater, the wall, the tray, my hair. 3 things you hear. The rain, your voice. Nino arguing with Rosa downstairs. That actually pulled a breath I could use into my lungs. His mouth moved at one corner. He argues because she notices him. That's not why people argue. Sometimes it is. A beat passed. The tray sat on the console behind him now, forgotten. He stood close enough that I could feel the heat of him without any contact at all. Almost, always almost. "What happened to your hand?" I asked quietly, because it was easier than saying thank you for not letting me drown in my own nerves. He looked at the burn scar near his thumb as if he'd forgotten it existed. Oil fire. In a kitchen. In a basement. That was all he gave me. But the word basement hit something in his face that wasn't there before. Not pain exactly. Recognition of it. Old enough to have calcified. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe the storm. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe the fact that he had just pulled me back from a place inside my own head without making me feel stupid for going there. I reached for the tea tray behind him. My fingers brushed the back of his hand. It was nothing. It was everything. He went still in a way that made the whole hallway still with him. I drew my hand back too fast. "Sorry," his voice roughened by one grain. "Don't apologize for touching me, Alina." My name in his mouth felt more dangerous than the storm. Before I could answer, Vittorio came up the stairs with the timing of a curse. "Massimo's gone to the West Loop property. Says it's about invoices." Dante stepped back. The air rushed in where he'd been. "What invoices?" I asked. "The kind men lie about," Vittorio said. Dante's gaze stayed on me. "You're not leaving this floor. That's not a request, is it?" "No," he turned to go. "Dante," he paused. "You still haven't told me why Bruno did it." His face went unreadable. "Because someone wanted to see whether I would hear you." Then he left, coat already in hand, and I understood the first mystery was closing only so something worse could open. That night he came back with blood on his cuff and rain in his hair. Not his blood, I thought, then hated myself for checking. Rosa sent everyone else away and ordered me to bring the medical tray to the study. Bianca was still out on a call. I carried the bandages in with hands that only shook a little. He stood by the desk, jacket off, white shirt unbuttoned at the throat and stained red at one sleeve. "It's not mine," he said before I asked. "That doesn't make it better." "No," he agreed. I set the tray down. "Sit." His eyebrow rose. "You say it to everybody. I wanted to hear how it feels." Something warm and brief moved through his eyes. He sat. The cut along his forearm was shallow but ugly. Knife maybe, close enough to count. I cleaned it carefully while the room smelled of antiseptic, rain, and whatever cold dark followed him in from outside. "You don't have to do this," he said. "I know." His hand flexed once under mine when I tied the bandage. Restraint. I felt it then for the first time, not as lack but as effort, as choice. "Massimo?" I asked. "Not yet. Yet is not comforting. It wasn't meant to be." I looked up. We were too close, again, almost. His gaze dropped to my mouth for one impossible second, then returned to my eyes as if the detour had cost him. A knock sounded. Rosa, merciful and infuriating both. I stepped back. The moment sealed itself shut, but not before I saw it. Not before I knew he had wanted something and stopped himself because I mattered more than wanting. Secrets always imagine they are choosing their hour. They never do. Mine came out after dinner, under chandelier light, in a room full of men who measured one another in silence and debt. Dante had taken me with him to a meeting at one of the riverfront properties because, as he put it, "If Massimo is there, I want your ears." It was not a romantic invitation. It was closer to being deputized into hell. I wore one of Rosa's dark dresses and a borrowed coat that still smelled faintly of cedar. Nobody asked whether I wanted to go. The truth was, I did. Fear and curiosity are cousins. Once one moves in, the other rarely stays away. The riverfront building used to be a warehouse. Now it was polished concrete, old brick, and private booths where expensive men drank expensive liquor while pretending logistics were legitimate. Security stood at every door. Italian rolled low across the room like distant thunder. When Dante entered, it thinned to respect so fast it was almost soundless. Massimo was there. He rose with perfect manners. "Cousin, Massimo." No warmth. No room either. I stayed half a step behind Dante, not from obedience but because every instinct in me understood lines and where survival lived in relation to them. Nino, flanking my left, leaned close enough to murmur, "If anyone offers you truffle fries, say no. They pretend sophistication while committing crimes against potatoes." I stared at him. He shrugged. "I cope in layers." A waiter passed with a tray of drinks. Glasses of amber amaro caught the light. One stopped in front of Dante. Before I thought about it, I took the glass from the tray and smelled it. The room noticed. Dante turned his head slightly. "Elena," I kept my face still and breathed again. "Bitter herbs, orange peel. Smoke and under it something wrong, too sweet on the back. Almond where no almond should be." "Don't drink this," I said. The waiter went white. Massimo's pleasant expression sharpened by a fraction. "What is it?" "Not almond," I said. "Apricot kernel, maybe. Or something meant to hide inside it." Nino muttered, "Madonna." Dante took the glass from my hand, sniffed once, then set it down untouched. The temperature in the room dropped through the floor. He looked at the waiter. "Who poured it?" The boy, he was barely more than that, began to shake. "I just carried it, sir, I swear to God." "I believe him," I said quietly. Dante's eyes flicked to me. "Why?" "Because he's scared of the wrong person." That landed somewhere deep. Massimo spoke before Dante could. "Search the bar." Men moved instantly. I stood very still while adrenaline crawled under my skin like insects. Dante did not touch me, but his body shifted half an inch, cutting the room off from mine. Protection disguised as posture. Almost, always almost. The search turned up a vial in the waste bin beneath the service station. One bartender missing. One camera looped for exactly 4 minutes. Too clean, too arranged. A setup. Massimo made the right noises. Anger, concern, family first. I watched Dante hear all of it and believe none. When the meeting ended, he took me not back to the car but up to the office above the warehouse floor. Private, locked, too quiet. The door shut behind us. I turned before he could speak. "My father didn't die in an accident." The words came out because they had been waiting under my ribs for years, and because if I didn't say them now in this room, with poison still ghosting the air, I never would. His expression did not change. That made it easier to go on. He worked nights at Bellini Bakery and mornings maintaining freezer units for restaurant suppliers. One of the Salvatore storage properties had a compressor failure. They said he got trapped trying to fix it. My throat tightened. They said he panicked. They said it was quick. Dante's face went very still. "I never believed that," I said. "So when I got the job at La Notte, I started watching, listening. Taking pictures of invoices I didn't understand, dates, names, deliveries that didn't match food orders." His gaze dropped to my handbag on the chair. Too late, I realized Rosa must have sent it up from the car. He crossed the room, opened it without ceremony, and took out the envelope I'd hidden in the lining months ago. I should have been furious. Instead, I was ashamed of the secrecy, of how small the envelope looked in his hand against the scale of what he controlled. "You searched my things. I kept you alive," he said, not unkindly. "Don't confuse that with trust." Fair again. Brutal but fair. He drew out the photos, delivery slips, freezer maintenance logs, one receipt signed with Massimo's initials. Another with a shell company tied to the river route. His jaw flexed. "You've been collecting this alone." "Yes." "Why?" "Because grief makes idiots out of honest daughters. Because nobody listens when poor girls say powerful men did something ugly. Because if I stopped, then my father really had just died in the dark and nothing in the world had cared." "Because it was my father," I said. The room held that sentence without trying to improve it. When he looked up, something in his eyes had shifted. Not softness. Never that word with him. Recognition, maybe, of obsession, of old wounds dressed as tasks. A knock came. Vittorio entered, saw the photos, and swore under his breath. "We have a problem," he said. "We've had one," Dante replied. "Bigger now. One of your safe phones pinged an outside number this morning." My stomach dropped. I had used the phone after breakfast, just once. To call my cousin Matteo, 19 and stupidly brave, tell him I was safe, tell him not to come near La Knot. I had not said where I was. Dante's gaze came to me. I didn't lie. I called my cousin. Vittorio closed his eyes briefly, as though prayer remained a tempting but unproductive hobby. Dante said very quietly, "Who knows his name?" "No one." That wasn't the question. Heat rushed into my face. "I don't know." That was the worst answer in the room. I saw it. So did he. "You should have told me," Dante said. "I know." It was the first time disappointment from him felt worse than fear. Below us, on the warehouse floor, a glass shattered. Every man in the building reached for a weapon at once. The ambush came from the service corridor, not the front, not the roof. Not the obvious places where armed men expect death and meet it like professionals. It came through the kitchen hall behind the office, under the cover of a fire alarm and one terrified sous chef screaming in actual confusion. For one insane second, I thought we were evacuating. Then the first shot hit the doorframe by my shoulder, and everything changed shape. Dante moved before sound finished moving. He caught the back of my neck and shoved me low behind the iron desk just as glass blew out of the office window. Vittorio dragged the overturned filing cabinet across the door with a crash. Nino, God bless his theatrical soul, swore so creatively it sounded rehearsed while drawing a gun from somewhere in his jacket that definitely should not have held one. "Down," Dante said. I was already down, curled against the desk, palms over my ears, heart trying to saw through bone. The room filled with gunfire, splintering wood, smoke, men shouting in Italian. Dante fired twice. Controlled, efficient, nothing wasted, nothing wild. That was the worst part, the lack of chaos in him. I looked up once at the wrong moment and saw him step into the line of fire to take a man at the doorway down before the man could angle a shot toward me. Dante didn't even flinch until it was done. Then I saw blood on his side. My own scream never made it all the way out. Nino grabbed my arm and hauled me toward the rear door Vittorio had somehow gotten open. "Move, Sparrow," Nino panted. "If you die, Rosa will blame me personally." We ran through the service stairwell, the air full of extinguisher powder and old grease. Somewhere above us, more shots. Somewhere below, a man yelling Dante's name like a curse. At the loading dock, black SUVs waited with engines running. Dante came down the last flight behind us, one hand pressed to his ribs, the other still holding his gun. He herded me into the back seat before getting in beside me, as if my body mattered more than the hole in his coat. The convoy tore into the night. No one spoke for the first 3 minutes. Nino drove like the devil owed him rent. Vittorio barked into a phone. Dante sat beside me, breathing too evenly, which is how I knew the pain was bad. "Let me see," I said. "No, Dante, no," I reached anyway. My fingers touched his side, wet heat. He went very still. "Stop moving," I whispered. A laugh left Nino in front, brief and disbelieving. "She tells him. Drive," Dante said. "I am driving heroically." We reached a safe house on the south side just before midnight. Brick row house outside, steel and surveillance inside. Bianca arrived 8 minutes later in scrubs under her coat, not even out of breath. She cut Dante's shirt open while I stood in the doorway trying not to shake. "Graze," Bianca said. "Lucky," Dante's eyes stayed on me while she cleaned the wound. "Elena." I realized I had gone white enough for him to notice through blood loss. "I'm fine." His mouth barely moved. "Liar," Bianca's eyes stayed on me while she worked. "Sit with him," she said. "If I leave him alone, he'll call this a scratch and bleed on my furniture out of principle." It's a very expensive principle, Nino said from the kitchen doorway. Also, if anyone gets blood on Rose's dish towels, I'm testifying for the prosecution. No one asked you, Bianca said. No one appreciates morale, he muttered, then looked at me. For the record, if the boss dies, I quit. I'm not emotionally equipped to manage the paperwork. Dante almost smiled. Almost. It passed through his face like a secret and was gone. Bianca finished the bandage, pointed 2 fingers at him in warning, then at me. If he gets pale, dizzy, or heroic, call me. Especially heroic. When the room finally emptied, the safe house grew too quiet. Rain tapped the windows. The lamp by the sofa cast a low gold circle that didn't quite reach the corners. Dante sat on the edge of the bed, shirt half open, white gauze bright against his ribs. I stood by the dresser with my hands clasped so tightly the knuckles hurt. I thought you'd die, I said before I could stop myself. His gaze lifted to mine. I looked away. I know that's not the most important thing that happened tonight. It mattered to you. That was the problem. I nodded once. For a long moment he only watched me. Then very carefully he held out his hand. I crossed the room before I could decide whether I should. He drew me in just far enough that my knees touched his. Nothing else. No claim, no pressure. Just warmth offered like something breakable. Listen to me, Alina, he said. War started tonight. That means I become less safe to stand near, not more. My throat tightened. I noticed, and still you're here. Where else would I go? Something unreadable moved behind his eyes. Dante, he knew the answer to that. Away, anywhere. She should have run from him the moment he broke the door. But all he could hear was the hoarse way she had said the boy first, with blood on her hands and terror in her voice. No one in his world gave anything away in the dark. She had. It was still undoing him. I didn't know what changed in his face, only that it softened by some small, dangerous degree. He lifted his hand to my cheek and stopped before touching it. Almost. I turned my face the last inch myself. His fingers settled against my skin like he could feel the pulse there and hated how much it mattered. I could barely breathe. His thumb brushed once beneath my eye, not because I was crying. I wasn't, not yet, but because I might. Tell me to stop, he said quietly. What came out of me was smaller, more honest, and far more frightening than a declaration. Don't leave me alone tonight. His eyes closed for half a heartbeat. Then he kissed me, not hard. Not hungry, though hunger lived under it. Slow, careful, the kind of kiss a man gives when restraint is costing him blood. My hands closed in the open edges of his shirt. He made a rough sound low in his throat and pulled back before I could understand how I was already leaning after him. Forehead to forehead, he stayed there, breathing me in and refusing himself something I could feel between us like heat. Sleep, Sparrow, he said, voice frayed at the edges. Before I forget how. I lay down because my legs had stopped belonging to me. He pulled the blanket over me with hands that had killed for me less than an hour ago, then turned off the lamp. In the dark I heard it, the soft metallic click of his lighter. For the first time it didn't sound like fear. Outside, rain kept falling. Inside, war had arrived. I woke to the smell of coffee and gun oil. Not together. Separately somehow, but close enough in time that they belonged to the same morning. Safe house mornings, apparently, had their own logic. Bianca had gone. Nino had not. I could hear him downstairs arguing with somebody on the phone in a voice pitched halfway between insult and prayer. No, Rosa, I did not skip breakfast. I had half a pear. That counts as suffering, because if I die lean, it will confuse my enemies. I sat up too fast and regretted it. My mouth tasted like old adrenaline. My lips still remembered Dante's kiss in a way the rest of me did not know how to survive. He wasn't in the room. That mattered more than it should have. I found him in the kitchen with Vittorio. Vittorio was alive, which should not have felt like a surprise. It did. His left arm was in a sling. his suit replaced by a dark sweater that made him look less like a consigliere and more like an aging professor with access to armed men. The effect was not reassuring. Dante stood by the counter, jacket on, cup untouched, the silver lighter turning once through his fingers before disappearing into his palm when he saw me. "Elena," Vittorio said. "Sit." Everyone in this world loved that word. I sat anyway. Dante placed a folded train ticket on the table in front of me. My eyes dropped to it. Union Station. Departure noon. Destination sent. "Louis, what is this?" "A chance," he said. The kitchen went very still. Neen, leaning in the doorway with an apple he was pretending counted as lunch, looked from Dante to me, and wisely shut his mouth for almost 3 whole seconds. "I hate noble decisions," he said finally. "They ruin the complexion." "Out," Dante said. Nino sighed like a tragic actor, denied applause and left, though not before sliding the apple into Rose's waiting hand as he passed her in the hall. She looked after him with the long-suffering expression of a woman already too attached to admit it. I stared at the ticket until the letters blurred. "Massimo knows your name now," Dante said. "He knows your cousins. He knows where you worked, where you lived, who you'd call when frightened. If you stay near me, he'll keep using that. You're sending me away. I'm giving you a door." That was worse somehow. If he had ordered me, I could have hated him cleanly. Vittorio set an envelope beside the ticket. "Cash, a new ID, keys, the shape of escape. Your cousin Matteo is already on a bus south," he said. "2 of our men will put you both in a furnished place. New start. No one touches you there." My throat tightened so hard it hurt. This was the exit point people always imagined existed in stories like this. A clean break. Survival with enough distance to become denial. I should have grabbed it. Instead, I looked at Dante. "And what happens here? Nothing that belongs to you." That angered me enough to make the next words easier. "You don't get to decide that." His gaze sharpened. "I do when men are shooting at you because you stood next to me." Rosa came in then with plates neither of us touched. She set one in front of me, one in front of Dante, and one in front of Vittorio before resting her hand for a second on my shoulder. "Sometimes leaving is the brave thing," she said quietly. "And sometimes it's only the easy thing," I whispered, her fingers pressed once. "That too." The morning fractured after that. Calls, cars, orders. I packed the small bag Bianca had brought over from the house and found my hands shaking when I folded the borrowed sweater I had worn that first night. At the bottom of the bag sat the envelope of my father's papers, the evidence I had hoarded like a private religion. Police would take it, maybe. Dante would use it, certainly. I tucked it into my coat and hated myself for knowing which certainty was more real. By 11:30, I was in the back of an SUV with Vittorio beside me and 2 silent men in front. Chicago moved past the windows in wet gray blocks. We stopped once at a red light near the church where my mother used to light candles for impossible things. "You care for him," Vittorio said. It wasn't a question. I kept my eyes on the rain tracking down the glass. "That seems medically unwise." A sound almost like approval passed through him. "Usually, he kills people, yes. And you say that like weather." "No," he adjusted the sling with his good hand. "I say it like cost." That sat between us all the way to Union Station. Inside, the station smelled of wet wool, coffee, and departure. Matteo waited near the gate, 19 and pale and trying not to look terrified. The instant he saw me, he crossed the floor in 3 strides and hugged me hard enough to bruise. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." "For what?" He pulled back. His face had changed in the last 24 hours. "Shame will do that fast. A man came to the apartment 2 days ago, said he worked with your boss, asked if you were all right. I told him about the restaurant, about calling you there." He swallowed hard. "Elena, I didn't know." The world narrowed to one ugly line of understanding. Massimo had not found me by magic. He had followed Matteo through me. Vittorio's mouth went flat. On the train, now. Matteo looked at him, then at me. Come with me. The gate call echoed overhead. This was it, the exact clean break. The last chance at the life I had still been pretending existed. A rented apartment, late bills, ordinary fear, grief that fit inside legal words. I could step onto that train and keep my soul in lighter colors. Then my phone, one of Dante's temporary ones, vibrated in my coat. A text from Nino. Rosa's car was hit leaving the house. She's alive. Don't tell the boss I said this, but he looks like murder in a suit. I closed my eyes. There it was, the full price of proximity, not just me. Anyone who fed me, warned me, laughed with me, handed me tea and a towel and a room with a lock on the inside. Massimo would keep reaching through me until someone stopped his hand. Alina, Matteo said again, voice breaking now, please. I took the train ticket and tore it in half. Vittorio stared. Matteo swore softly in disbelief. The gate attendant called boarding like the world had not just split open in public. I can't keep running while other people pay for it, I said. My voice shook, but it held. Take him south. Keep him there. If he calls me, don't let him back. Alina, I kissed Matteo's forehead the way our mother used to when she wanted obedience dressed up as love. Go, I said. Lose my number. That's how you make this up to me. He cried when he got on the train. I did not. I watched until the doors closed, and with them the last easy version of my life. Then I took my father's envelope out of my bag and handed it to Vittorio. Take me back, I said. This time I walked into the darkness with my eyes open. When we got back to the house, the air smelled faintly of bleach and burned rubber. That was my first clue. My second was Rosa in the kitchen, furious and alive, stirring tomato sauce with one hand while a cut crossed her temple under a bandage. Anger made her prettier, or maybe survival did. They cracked the rear bumper and scared me into wasting a perfectly good tray of eggplant, she said when she saw me. Idiots. I crossed the room and hugged her before I could overthink it. She stiffened in surprise, then folded me in with her free arm and patted my back exactly once. Enough, she said gruffly. You're making a scene. Nino stood at the stove pretending he had any legitimate reason to be there. For the record, she cried over the eggplant, not me. I found this wounding. Rosa pointed the wooden spoon at him. I cried because you were shouting and it was irritating. Same difference, he said hopefully. A laugh escaped me, thin but real. It vanished when Dante came in. He looked like he hadn't slept in a year, not disheveled. He would never grant chaos that much victory. But there was something flint-hard in the set of his shoulders. Some restraint pulled so tight it had become visible. His gaze went first to me, then to the torn train ticket still in my hand. You stayed. It was not satisfaction, it was not relief, it was something riskier than either. I came back, I said. He nodded once, nothing more. But Nino, who had developed an unhealthy ability to read silences for sport, turned away to hide a smile so badly Rosa hit his hip with the spoon. The house tightened around us by evening. More guards, fewer lights. Bianca arrived with supplies. Vittorio moved through rooms like a quiet storm. Nobody said Massimo's name unless they had something useful attached to it. I gave Dante the rest of my father's files in his office. He took them without thanks, which was somehow kinder than pretending courtesy could clean any of this. My father kept maintenance logs, I said, not just for bakery equipment, for everyone who paid cash. Dante flipped through the pages. His eyes stopped at one date and did not move. What is it? He set the page down. Nothing yet, I almost argued. Then Bianca asked for help downstairs and the moment passed. That night I made the mistake. Not the big romantic kind stories reward, the stupid human kind, the tired kind. Matteo called from a number I didn't know. I answered in the back garden because I could not bear the thought of him alone in some motel room believing I hated him. He was crying before he said hello. "I'm at St. Agnes," he whispered. "Near the river. I got off in Joliet and came back. I know, don't say it. But Alina, there's a man here I recognize from the restaurant. He says he wants to help." I think I made it worse. Every thought I should have had arrived 1 second too late. What man? I don't know his name, tall scar on his chin. He says if I bring the envelope he can clear Dad's. "Run," I said. Footsteps sounded behind me on the gravel. I turned. Not Dante. One of the house guards, Carlo Rixai, a man I had seen at every doorway for 3 days and never once actually looked at. That was my mistake, too. How ordinary trust can become when exhaustion sands the edges off fear. "Phone," he said. I backed up. "No," he moved fast. The world collapsed to gravel, iron fingers, the phone skidding away, my scream caught under a palm. He dragged me through the side gate to a waiting van, before the nearest camera could see the angle right. Inside already sat Matteo, bleeding from the mouth, wrists zip-tied, eyes huge with apology and horror. "Don't," I said to him around the hand over my face. "Don't you dare." Carlo shut the doors and put a gun to Matteo's ribs. "Quiet, both of you. We drove 20 minutes, maybe less. Panic ruins clocks. The van smelled of gasoline and old onions." Matteo kept shaking his head at me as if regret alone could reverse time. When the hood came off, I knew the place by cold before sight. The old Bellini bakery, or what was left of it. Stripped floors, dead display case, dust. My father's front room turned into a shell. Carlo marched us through the kitchen and down the back steps to the basement freezer. I stopped dead. "No," he shoved me in anyway. The room was smaller than I remembered and colder than memory allowed. The compressor rattled wrong, same ugly hitch my father used to complain about. Matteo sagged against the wall beside me, sobbing now in short, ugly breaths. Carlo locked the door from the outside, and then Massimo's voice came through the vent, smooth as ever. Friendly enough to make the dark feel personal. "I'm sorry about the nostalgia, Alina, but I thought you'd appreciate the symmetry." My whole body went rigid. "What do you want?" "You," he said. "Or rather, what Dante becomes when he thinks he might lose you." Matteo made a broken sound beside me. I took his bound hands in mine, and forced my voice steady, though my teeth had started to knock together. "You used him, yes, because you're weaker than he is." The vent went quiet for 1 beat too long, then Massimo laughed. "Careful." That's the kind of thing Dante would say. Something moved in the dark then, not outside me but inside, the shape of the truth. Villain and hero cut from the same family cloth, one choosing restraint and the other mistaking control for strength. Matteo's breathing was getting worse. I looked up at the vent, inhaled, and caught a ghost of cigarette smoke and bitter almond. Poison again, somewhere above, somewhere waiting. I did not have my father's papers anymore. I did have his lessons. I knelt by the old compressor housing, felt the frost-rimed pipe, the vibration in the failing motor. "When he opens this door," I whispered to Matteo, "fall left." "What are you doing?" "Trying not to die where my father did. For the first time in years." I understood the mechanical language. He had spoken to metal when he thought I wasn't listening. Outside the freezer, a lighter clicked. Not Dante's. Wrong rhythm, wrong hand. And I knew with a sudden terrifying certainty that if Dante came for me, the door might not open in time. Cold changes sound. It makes everything thinner, more brittle, even fear. Matteo's teeth chattered beside me in the dark while I knelt by the compressor and pressed my frozen fingers against the access panel latch. My father used to curse this model under his breath, because the emergency pressure release sat inside the housing instead of outside where it belonged. "Designed by a man who's never had to crawl under it," he'd say, then hand me the flashlight. I had held the light. I had listened. Now I used a broken shelf hook from the floor drain to pry the latch. Outside, Massimo talked to somebody in that easy, civilized voice he wore like a church suit. I caught fragments through the vent. He'll come himself. Make him choose. Matteo shivered so hard his shoulder knocked the wall. I'm sorry, he whispered again. I kept working the hook under the latch. If we live, I'll decide whether I forgive you. He laughed once, watery and miserable. Good. If he could still laugh, he wasn't gone yet. The panel gave. Inside, coils, frost, a humming motor. The emergency valve, red-capped and rhymed white. I yanked it, at first nothing. Then the compressor screamed, not exploded, worse. A metal shriek like the machine had found a voice at the exact moment it died. Steam blasted from the side vent. Alarm sensors somewhere in the bakery woke up and started shrilling through the building. Men shouted outside, footsteps thundered. Left, I told Matteo. The outer bolt snapped back. The door opened 3 inches before the warped lower hinge jammed against the ice buckling from the inside. Carlo's face appeared in the gap, furious and startled. I slammed the hook through the opening and caught him across the cheek. He cursed and stumbled back. Matteo threw himself left exactly as I had said. I shoved at the door with both hands. It moved another inch. Then I heard gunfire upstairs. Not random, controlled, precise, terrible in its calm. Dante. My whole body answered the sound. The hallway outside erupted. Someone went down hard against the freezer door. Carlo yelled. Another man screamed. Then over all of it, one voice cut through like a blade. Back away from the door. The world stopped. Even now, even freezing and half sick with terror, I obeyed him. I stumbled back, dragging Matteo with me just as the first shot blew the ruined hinge. The second took the lock plate. The third never came, because then the door ripped inward on force alone and Dante Salvator came through it like judgment. Coat open, gun in one hand. Silver lighter in the other, as if he had lit the stairwell himself rather than trust the dying power. Nino behind him with a rifle and an expression of personal offense toward the entire concept of kidnapping. Vittorio farther back, pale under the skin and bleeding through his sling, because of course he had come injured and furious both. Dante saw me. Nothing else lived in his face. He crossed the room in 2 strides, dropped the gun, and caught me so hard my feet left the floor. I clung back with both hands. No elegance, no dignity, just relief so sharp it hurt. You're hurt, he said against my hair. Not badly. Matteo, Vittorio barked. Here, my cousin croaked from the floor. Nino hauled him up. Excellent. The family reunion segment of this evening is over. Can we all leave before I develop a complex? I made a strangled sound that might have been a laugh, might have been sobbing. Nino heard both and chose mercy. On the stairs above, shots cracked again. Dante set me behind him so fast the room spun. Carlo, he asked. Ran, Vittorio said. Not far. Dante's jaw flexed. He looked at Matteo once, taking in the split lip, the zip ties, the shame. He talked. He lured me, but he didn't know, I said quickly. Carlo used him. That is not the same as innocent, Dante said. I know. He glanced at me then and something in his expression altered. Respect, perhaps, for not asking him to lie. We moved through the bakery fast. Upstairs, flour dust floated in the broken light. Carlo lay bleeding by the prep table, alive enough to groan. Dante didn't waste a word on him. The man would disappear into the machinery of this world and never trouble daylight again. Massimo was gone. Of course he was. Villains like him preferred distance until the exact moment distance stopped serving. In the alley behind the bakery, Bianca waited by the SUV with blankets and a medical bag. She wrapped one around Matteo and another around me, then glanced at Dante and swore quietly in Italian. What? I asked. He reopened the wound, she said. Nino looked skyward. Wonderful. My favorite pastime, watching men pretend stitches are opinions. Dante ignored him. I took his wrist before he could step away. He stilled. You came, I said. His eyes dropped to my hand on him, then lifted to my face. Did you think I would? No, that was the terrible thing. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped doubting that part. He touched my cheek, the cold side this time, and his voice lowered. You made the alarm scream. My father used to repair those compressors. That landed hard, too hard. He looked at me as if another piece of a puzzle had just cut his hand on the way into place. What? I asked. Later, before I could fight him on it, Vittorio appeared, blood loss making him grayer by the minute. Massimo sent a message. Dante turned. Vittorio held up a burner phone. On the screen, a single text. Next time I take what makes you kneel. Silence spread outward from Dante like blast heat. I understood then. Not the whole truth, but enough. Massimo did not want me dead first. He wanted Dante stripped, cornered, made less than what he believed himself to be. And Dante, standing in the alley with blood darkening his shirt and my hand still on his wrist, looked like a man deciding exactly what he would become in return. That was the moment I knew one of us might not survive what came next. War, when it came cleanly at last, looked less like an explosion and more like a ledger. Names, roots, properties. Which men still answered to Massimo, which men answered to fear, which men answered only to money. Dante spread the city across the dining room table with Vittorio and 3 captains, while I sat at the far end with my father's maintenance logs and a pot of coffee gone cold. For 12 hours, nobody raised their voice. That was how I knew it was real. Massimo had a river house on paper, a private events venue with refrigerated storage in the basement, and enough truck access to move anything through the back docks. My father's logs tied the compressors there to the same shell company that had serviced the freezer where he died. The invoice trail matched the numbers I'd copied months ago. Same routes. Same fake produce shipments, same signatures, and one note in my father's hand I had never understood until then. MS said the girl in the pantry was not our concern. The room went silent when I read it aloud. Dante's chair scraped back. What girl? I asked. No one answered quickly enough. The slow mystery of him, of the hard shape under all that control, opened at last because it had to. Chiara, Vittorio said quietly. Dante did not look at me. He looked at the note like it had reached out of the dead to put a hand around his throat. My sister, Vittorio said, answering the question I had not spoken. Years ago, during a house raid. She was hidden in a pantry. The men set fire to the lower floor to flush out witnesses. Understanding moved through me in cold layers. My father was there. Dante's voice came like stone dragged over concrete. Your father tried to get her out. I stared at him. He lifted his gaze at last. There was no shield left on his face now, not from me. He worked maintenance at that property. He heard her. He got to the door before I did. Massimo was already there. He said leaving the room closed bought us time to move the ledger and the cash. Your father refused. They fought. The fire spread. By the time I broke the lock, his jaw flexed once. Chiara was dead. Your father got me out. Years later, when he started asking questions about that night, Massimo had him killed in the freezer and called it an accident. The room around me disappeared. My father. Dante's sister. One locked door becoming another until suddenly my entire life stood on the same hinge. You knew who I was, I whispered. Not at first, Dante said. Not until you said Bellini in my office. After that I knew. You should have told me. Yes. It was the only answer possible, and it made me want to throw the coffee pot through the window. Instead I sat very still because if I moved, I might break in some permanent way. My father died because he tried to save your sister. And because Massimo wanted everyone loyal to conscience dead, Dante said. There it was, the mirror at last. Dante built from guilt and restraint. Massimo built from the same fire and turned toward control so absolute it could justify any cruelty. Nino, who had entered halfway through this, and somehow understood enough to keep his mouth shut until exactly the right second, set a plate of untouched sandwiches down beside me. "For the record," he said softly, "this is the worst family tree I've ever witnessed." It startled a laugh out of me so broken it bordered on a sob. Rosa, behind him, pressed her lips together and nodded once as if to say good, breathe, then keep going. Dante came around the table then and knelt in front of me. The room vanished again, but differently. "I should have told you before now," he said. "I didn't because the truth would have sounded like strategy and your grief had been used enough. You decided for me." "Yes." I hated how honest he stayed, even when it hurt him. "What happens now?" I asked. His eyes held mine. "Now it ends." The river house sat on black water under a moon too thin to be called kind. Dante took me because I refused to be left behind, and because the old service corridors made more sense to me than they did to his men. My father's notes had marked a secondary compressor line beneath the banquet hall, an emergency cutoff inside the wine cellar, a blind spot in the camera run where a maintenance crawlspace cut under the back dock. We entered through there. The crawlspace smelled of damp concrete and rust. Armed men moved soundlessly around us. Vittorio, against Bianca's orders and common sense, came anyway. Nino kissed Rosa's cheek before we left, then announced to the room, "If I die, tell everyone I was shredded." Emotionally and physically. Rosa smacked the back of his head so hard he nearly missed the doorway. Inside, the river house glowed warm and empty above us. Candles on tables, glasses set, a fake elegance waiting for guests who would never come. Massimo stood in the ballroom as if he had booked it for a wedding. "Cousin," he said when Dante stepped out. "You always did arrive personally for the things that hurt." I stayed in the service arch with Vittorio and Nino, not hidden, not exposed, the exact place Dante had taught me to survive. Massimo saw me anyway and smiled. "And Alina, Bellini blood in the house again. Your father was sentimental too." Dante moved before the last word died. Gunfire broke the room apart. Everything happened at once. Men falling, candlelight shattering, Nino swearing with operatic conviction while dragging a wounded guard behind the bar. Vittorio taking a shot meant for Dante and firing back from one knee. I ran the way fear has taught women to run for centuries. Low, fast, useful, and cut the power to the basement refrigeration line exactly where the maintenance note said it would trigger the smoke fail-safe. Alarms screamed, sprinklers burst overhead. Massimo's men lost the room, Dante gained it. At the center of the ballroom, among broken glass and artificial rain, Massimo raised his gun with blood on his mouth and family in his face. "You think you're better than me," he shouted. Dante, walking toward him through the water, looked almost peaceful. "No." That answer changed something. In Massimo maybe, in me certainly, because he wasn't denying the darkness. He was denying the lie that darkness and love could not live in the same body without one killing the other. Massimo fired once toward me. Vittorio stepped between us. The shot took him high in the chest. I screamed. Dante didn't. He shot Massimo twice, center mass, with the efficiency of a man cutting off his own hand. Massimo hit the marble hard. The sound barely carried over the sprinklers. By the time Bianca reached Vittorio, we all knew. He looked at Dante once, blood on his teeth and something like weary affection in his eyes. "Your father would hate the drapes," he murmured. Then he died. No one spoke for a long time. Water ran down Dante's face, but it was not rain now. I took his hand anyway, soaked and shaking, and he let me. The house smelled of gunpowder, extinguished candles, and the sharp, clean grief of things finally named. Sirens would come later, managed and redirected by men who knew how the city survived itself. Bodies would disappear, stories would be written. None of them would matter, only this did. Massimo lay dead, Vittorio lay still. The war was over and had cost exactly what a war demands. Not everything, but enough to make victory feel like amputation. Dante, looked at the body of his cousin, then at me. "It is over," he said. 3 months after the River House, I opened the bakery again. Not the old one. That building carried too much ice in the walls for me ever to love it honestly. Dante bought the narrow corner space 2 blocks over with south-facing windows, a scarred oak counter, and a kitchen small enough to feel like work instead of theater. He tried not to call it a gift. I tried not to call it surrender. In the end, it became what most things between us became, a decision neither of us could have made alone. We named it Bellini & Co. because my father deserved daylight in the sign. The first week we sold out of Cornetti by 9 and espresso by 11. Rosa ran the back half the way queens run countries. Nino handled deliveries with tragic dignity and an unbroken habit of announcing, every single morning, that today he was beginning a cleaner life. Every single morning, Rosa put focaccia in his hand before noon. One Thursday, I caught him leaning against the prep table eating it while looking at her like a man watching religion happen at close range. "She does this to sabotage me," he told me in confidence. "Also possibly because she loves me. The evidence is mixed." "The evidence is bread," I said. "Exactly, extremely emotional bread." I laughed. It felt easier now. Not free, nothing in Dante's world became free, but easier. Bianca came by twice a week to bully everyone into checkups. Matteo called on Sundays from St. Louis, chastened and alive. He had started automotive school and apologized less often now, which I took as healing. Vittorio's empty chair in Dante's dining room remained empty. Some losses should stay visible. Dante came to the bakery late, usually after the lunch rush, carrying the city on his shoulders and trying not to bring too much of it through the door. The men outside still went quiet when he stepped from the car. The street still noticed him. But in the kitchen, under Rosa's disapproval and my flour-dusted orders, he became something stranger than harmless. Human. That afternoon, I was glazing individual orange chocolate cakes when he came in through the back. I knew it was him before I saw him. Soft metallic click. His lighter. Always once before he pocketed it. My body still knew that sound in 2 languages now, terror and relief. It had settled somewhere in between and become belonging. "What are those?" he asked. He had taken off his coat, but not his authority. Some things didn't come off. The dark shirt at his throat was open 1 button. A faint scar showed just above the collarbone when he moved. I tried not to notice, failed. "Dessert," I said, "helpful." I held out a spoon with a sample of the filling. "Taste it, then criticize me." His mouth touched the spoon. I had to look at the counter because I was, apparently, still not immune to very small acts. He swallowed. Bitter orange, dark chocolate, salt. And something hidden. I smiled despite myself. "Burnt sugar." "For what?" "The shell." I tapped one cooling on the rack. Glossy dark top, thin caramel layer under it. Looks hard, breaks if you breathe wrong. Under that it's softer than it has any right to be. His gaze moved from the cakes to my face. I set the spoon down because my hand had become unreliable. "Is it any good?" I asked. "Yes." His voice went quieter, too honest, but yes. Nino walked in at exactly the wrong and therefore perfect moment, carrying a sack of flour. He looked from the cakes to Dante to me and sighed like a man burdened by beauty. "This is what I'm saying," he announced. "I work in a live-action sonnet and nobody compensates me." Rosa, behind him with a tray of rolls, clicked her tongue. "Move or I'll compensate you with a concussion." He moved, immediately, lovingly. Later, after close, I found Dante in the empty front room standing by the window with Vittorio's old ring box in his hand. I knew it was Vittorio's because Bianca had once told me he kept emergency cash in it and called it sentiment. Men in this world hid tenderness inside practical objects and expected nobody to notice. Unfortunately for them, I noticed professionally. Dante turned when I came out from the kitchen. the streetlights painted gold across the floorboards. The bakery smelled of espresso grounds, orange peel, and bread cooling in the racks. "I had a speech," he said. That startled a laugh out of me. "You?" "Voluntary. It was brief, I'm sure." He looked at the box, then back at me. "It got worse in rehearsal." My chest tightened so suddenly I had to put a hand on the counter. He came closer, not all the way, leaving me room because even now he chose me that way. Always, every time. "I can't offer you harmless," he said. "I can offer you truth, my name, my house. This life as it is without lying about the cost, and every choice after tonight is yours." He opened the box. The ring inside was old, not huge. Gold worn thin at the edges, a small diamond cut in another decade when people expected beauty to survive harder lives. "It belonged to my mother," he said. "Vittorio kept it when she died because my father would have sold it out of spite. He gave it back to me the week before the river house." I couldn't speak. His eyes stayed on mine. "Marry me, Sparrow." There it was, that name that had once sounded like a hand closing around my life, and now sounded like home offered without disguise. My answer heard on the way out, which is how I knew it was true. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, but only if you understand I'm going to argue with you until we're old." The tension broke out of his face like dawn. He slid the ring onto my finger with hands far steadier than mine. Then he rested his forehead against mine, not kissing me yet, just staying there in the quiet we had earned. Dante, he had thought wanting ordinary things would weaken him. A ring. A shop closed at night, flower on her cheek. Instead, it felt worse than weakness and better than power. It felt like having something the world could still take and choosing it anyway. When he kissed me, it was warm instead of desperate, settled instead of stolen. Outside, the city kept all its shadows. Inside, Rosa banged pans in the kitchen and Nino loudly pretended not to cry over romance while absolutely doing so. For the first time in months, the quiet that followed belonged to us. 8 months later, the lights went out during the morning rush. 1 second Bellini & Co. was all steam, pastry cases, and regulars arguing about biscotti. The next, the espresso machine died mid-hiss. The front room dropped into a soft communal gasp, and somewhere in the kitchen one of the new apprentices, Sophia, 17. All elbows and bravery until actual inconvenience arrived, made a frightened sound in the dark. Every muscle in my body remembered another room, another lock, another night. Before the old fear could finish rising, I heard it, click, the soft metallic opening of Dante's lighter. A small flame bloomed beyond the prep table, gold and steady. He had been in the office going over invoices when the power failed. Now he stood in the doorway, suit sleeves rolled, lighter raised, the room orienting itself around that tiny controlled fire the way it once had around terror. Only now it was morning. Flour dust hung in the glow like harmless weather. Rosa cursed the electric grid. Nino, at the register, declared to the customers that anyone who remained calm would receive a free biscotto, and anyone who panicked would be charged double for emotional wear and tear. "You cannot charge for panic," Rosa shouted. "Watch me," he shouted back. Laughter rippled through the dark. Then Sophia whimpered from the storage hall. Dante moved toward me first on instinct. He didn't even know he was doing it. He just turned to where I stood by the ovens, my pulse kicking hard at old ghosts, and I heard myself say it before fear could make me smaller. Her first. The flame in his hand stilled. For one suspended beat, the whole story of us lived in that silence. Then he nodded once and went straight past me. He found Sophia crouched beside the flour bins, with her hands over her ears. When he came back, he had her tucked against his side, speaking to her in the same calm, blade-soft voice that had once cut through my panic and reached the person underneath it. He set her on a stool near Rosa, handed Nino the lighter so he could find the emergency panel, and only then crossed the kitchen to me. The room had changed in less than a minute. The old fear had nowhere to land. "You all right?" he asked. I looked at him, at the man who had heard me in the dark and become the sound I trusted most, at the scar near his thumb. The line time had softened around his mouth, the impossible tenderness he still wore like a secret when anyone else was in the room. "Yes," I said. And because he deserved the whole truth when I had it, "Then you clicked that lighter." His gaze changed, not surprise, recognition deep enough to ache. He stepped closer, one hand settling low at my waist, quiet and sure. "You did it again," he said. "What?" He glanced toward Sophia, now drinking water while Rosa insulted the electric company in 3 dialects. "You were frightened, and you still sent me to someone else first." I swallowed. "She's 17. That isn't why." Maybe he was right. Maybe some parts of a person stay stubbornly themselves, even after blood, war, and choosing a darkness with open eyes. "Why then?" I asked softly. His thumb moved once at my side. "Because you hear fear and make room for it, even when it costs you, especially then." Something tender and unbearable moved through me. "That sounds like a flaw." "It ruined my life," he said. I laughed. So did he, barely. The power came back with a sudden buzz and a cheer from the front room. Nino threw both hands up like a televangelist saved by infrastructure. "Miracles are real," he declared. "Also, whoever ordered 6 cannoli and then abandoned them during adversity, I have accepted your sacrifice personally." Rosa rolled her eyes so hard the room nearly dimmed again. By noon, the rush was over. Sophia had stopped trembling. Dante finished the invoices in my office while I wrapped day-olds for the shelter 2 blocks down. The ordinary shape of the morning, the receipts, the sugar on the floor, the little brass bell over the door, felt more radical than anything we had survived with guns in our hands. When we locked up that evening, rain had started over the city in a soft gray veil. Dante stood beside me under the awning while I turned the sign from open to closed. My wedding ring caught the last of the light. His hand found the back of my neck the way it always did now, not to control me, just to know where I was. "Home, Sparrow?" he asked. The word landed warm, entirely warm, no edges left. I looked down the street at the life we had built, not safe, never that, but true. Rosa inside counting cash and pretending not to smile at Nino, who was wrapping her extra focaccia in wax paper like a man hiding devotion inside carbohydrates. Bianca's car double-parked at the curb. Matteo coming in next month for a visit. Vittorio's ring on my hand. My father's name over the door. Dante beside me, changed by who he had needed to become and gentled, somehow, by who he had chosen to remain. There are no fairy tales in cities like ours. Only bargains. Only costs. Only the quiet defiance of loving someone dangerous and refusing to lie about what that means. I took Dante's hand and led him into the rain. Behind us, in the dark bakery, his lighter clicked once more as he reached back to light the small candle we kept in the window after close. The first time I heard that sound, it meant I might live. Now it meant I was home. And maybe that is the unresolved thing love leaves us with, not whether it can survive darkness, but whether being chosen by someone shaped by it can ever stop feeling like a beautiful kind of risk. Would you have chosen Dante, knowing exactly what it would cost?